1983, and I'm sitting at home with my boyfriend reading the Sunday Colour supplements, and I'm reading this article about the Yanomami people of northern Brazil and Peruvian Amazonia, indigenous people. It's 1983, and I'm sitting at home reading the papers, and I read this really fascinating article about the Yanomami people of northern Brazil and Peruvian Amazonia, the indigenous people. And I thought, this is absolutely fascinating. This is what I want to be doing. I want to find out, I want to go and meet some indigenous people. So, I did a bit of research. I don't know what you think was wrong with doing research in 1983, but if you think about it, we didn't have the internet, so it took a bit more time. But I found out that actually you couldn't go and meet some indigenous people. That actually wasn't going to happen. What I could do was I could go to Peru and I could do a 3-week tourist tour with, you know, the Inca Trail and the Nazca Lines and all of that. And I spent a year learning Spanish, and I got 2 months off work. It was a month paid and a month unpaid leave. And the following summer, I set off. I said goodbye to my job, and I said goodbye to my boyfriend, and I set off to Peru. And ended up in Lima, and the tour guide was a really annoying Scottish guy called Pete. He was a great tour guide, but he'd go out with you in the daytime, he'd be really nice to everybody, and at night he'd get drunk with a few of us and he'd slag off all the others. And I thought that was really mean and rude. But it grew on me over the weeks. And Pete and I had a little fling over the weeks, and it turns out that Pete was not just a tour guide, he was also an anthropologist, and he'd only come to Peru and got the money to be he got paid to be a tour guide so that he could go back to the indigenous village in Peruvian Amazonia where he'd done his anthropology fieldwork a couple of years earlier, and he was going to go back there straight after this tour, and he agreed to take me with him. So we went back to Lima after the tour, rode on a couple of weeks of getting all the stuff together, travelling to Pucallpa, travelling to Atalaya, finding somebody to take us 5 hours downriver up the Urubamba to where the Urubamba and the Ucayali rivers meet, where you find the village of Santa Clara. And there I was, sitting in a Peruvian Amazonian indigenous village, the actual thing that I'd wanted to do back the previous summer, and then I discovered you can't do it. But because I'd made this open space and I'd met this really interesting guy, I ended up actually being there and doing it. And up till then, and probably up till now, it was the best week of my life. Living there with people that were living like they'd lived for 2,000 years. We ate what they hunted for, fished for, grew beautiful food, drank the Masato beer, and I spent my week. They spoke Piro, but they also spoke Spanish, so I could talk to them. Pete had been the godfather of several of their children, so he was their compadre, which meant that I was their comadre, so I was connected and like family. And I spent all my week recording songs and stories of the kids and the adults and playing them back on the tape recorder. And Pete spent his week doing anthropology, which I didn't know what it was, but it turns out it's lying in a hammock smoking. And people came up and chatted to him, and that was what he was doing. So I learned a bit about anthropology, and we went back. That was that. We had the week rolled on. We went back to Lima, and I just got there in time to get my 30th birthday phone call from my mum. You had to, can you imagine a time there'd no internet and you had to be somewhere to get a phone call? Well, there you go. So I got my 30th birthday phone call from my mum. I went back to my boyfriend, Pete went back to his PhD, and that was that. But a couple of years later, me and my boyfriend, we'd always agreed that we would be going to be splitting up at some point because he already had a child from his ex-wife, with his ex-wife, who used to come and visit us. And I always knew that I would be wanting to have a child at some point. So he was, I think I had a 30-second birthday and divorce party, and we split up very amicably. And I went off to think about who was going to be the father of my child. So I think the person that I really wanted would be Pete, so he was the first person that I interviewed for this job. But we had a very nice weekend together. You know, everything would work fine, but he turned me down for the actual job offer because he was a bit younger than me and he had a career and it wasn't quite his plan. So I ended up finding William, who was a nice guy, married Will, and we had 3 years later we had Anna, who is now 32 and living in Los Angeles, but that's another story. So back to where we were. So I'm with William and Anna's 3 years old, and the writing is on the wall for our marriage. We're getting on really badly. We're arguing all the time. It's not good. Can see that it's not going to last. We talk about splitting up. And at that time, my friend's husband, who is also an anthropologist, and knew that I'd been in the rainforest with Pete, told me that Pete's book had been published, the book of his PhD, so I go and get a copy of it, and I find that I'm in the acknowledgements. So I read this book. I don't understand all the anthropology theory, but I do understand the book, and I'm reading about the people that I met, and it's beautiful. So I wrote to him to say, well, all of that really, and thanks for putting me in the acknowledgement. And he said, shall we meet? I'm now living in Manchester. That was just an hour away from where I was living. So we had a weekend together. We went out to a club the first night, and there were when you line up at a club, the doorman was letting people in 3 or 4 at a time, and when he got to us two, he said, are you two together? And Pete said, we haven't decided yet. So I thought, oh, okay, that's what's happening, is it? Because I thought that was what was happening too. So we went back to his, and that was the start of a 27-year beautiful love affair. But it was a very fiery, on and off beautiful love affair. It involved, we went back to Peru 3 or 4 times, but we were apart more than we were together, because I am the first person to admit, and my niece Jen, that some of you have met, would agree with me, that I'm a bit annoying. And Pete probably wouldn't agree, but all his friends would definitely agree, is a bit paranoid. And so, annoying and paranoid, it really didn't work out, and we had a very fiery relationship, and we would split up and get back, and split up and get back. But there was, and the last row that we had in Venice was like the row to end all rows, and it was like there was no going back after this row, so that was it. And we went our separate ways, and we didn't see each other for 10 years. And during that 10 years, and in fact during all the time when we'd been apart, I would think about him every day, and I would stop myself contacting him every day. And I wouldn't wish that life on anyone. It's like living a half-life. It's a shit life. And oh sorry, I told Jen I wouldn't swear, so just one. But you know, I was fine. You know, I saw other people. I did really interesting things. I travelled, but Pete was always missing. And so, on the 15th of August, 2021, which was 10 years on from when we'd last seen each other, I promised myself that I was going to go into a field, take a blanket, take all the old music and Unchained Melody, if you know the words for that, that was our song, Are You Still Mine? And all of that, and all the old love emails and photos, and I was going to wallow in it for a bit, and then I was going to get in touch with him and say, this is ridiculous, we have to do this. But it wasn't to be, because I got an email from somebody, and the headline of the email was sad and upsetting news. And it had been Pete's funeral the day before, and they'd wanted to invite me, but they didn't know my surname, because all of the times that we spent together, we'd only had eyes for each other, we'd had weekends away together, but we'd never been in each other's friends' lives. We didn't need the rest of the world, we just had each other. And so nobody knew my name. My surname, one of his friends knew. Finally, at the funeral, one of his friends just plucked my surname from somewhere, so his friend Christina was able to get in touch with me the next day. And the reason that they wanted to invite me to the funeral was that they knew me as Fiona, the love of Pete's life. So I pretty much fell apart, and I got in touch with Christina. I cancelled everything. I got in touch with Christina. I went up to Scotland. I spent time with his friends. I went to a Zoom memorial. I went to a real memorial. I've got really close to his friends. But I wanted to tell this story because I want you to think that if you've got something that you want to say to somebody, say it. Because the worst that can happen is that you get rejected. But if you don't say it, you're just rejecting yourself.
Can we please get a standing ovation? Everybody give a round of applause, please, all together. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I don't really know what to say, to be honest.